Deep inside the cold darkness of Shanidar Cave, in a chamber untouched by sunlight for tens of thousands of years, a silent wound waits to be seen. A Neanderthal rib, pierced cleanly through by the sharp edge of a stone point, lies frozen in time as if it never stopped bleeding. Half a world away, a fractured skull tells a story just as haunting. These ancient bones, cracked and broken, carry whispers from an age when survival was never guaranteed and danger came from every direction. But the real question is simple. What kind of danger was it? Were these wounds the result of hunts gone wrong, a desperate struggle against the giant beasts of the Ice Age? Or do they reveal something far more unsettling? Did the greatest threat to Neanderthals come not from the cold winds or the predators of the night but from each other? In the shadows of prehistory, did humans turn their weapons inward in moments of fear, anger, or bitter rivalry? Or was an even more mysterious force at work? Another species was moving silently across the ancient world, a species that would one day claim the entire planet. Could these wounds be the first traces of an encounter between two kinds of humans? To answer these questions, we must walk back into the Paleolithic, into a world carved by ice, shaped by violence, and bound together by fragile moments of compassion. The bones do not lie. They hold the truth exactly as it happened. All we need to do is listen to them. To understand the wounds carved into Neanderthal bones, we first have to understand the people themselves. The truth is far more complex than the old image of a brute swinging a club. Neanderthals were human, shaped by an environment harsher than anything we know today. They lived through the bitter cold of the Ice Age, a world where winter could freeze the earth solid and winds could slice through skin like knives. Food was scarce, the nights were long, and every step outside the shelter of a cave carried real danger. In conditions like these, strength was not optional. It was survival. Their bodies reflected this unforgiving world. Neanderthals were incredibly powerful, with broad chests, thick bones, and muscles built for close-range combat with massive animals. Their skulls were strong and dense, able to withstand impacts that would cripple a modern human. But they were not just strong. They were intelligent. They crafted sophisticated stone tools, controlled fire with precision, and understood their landscapes with an awareness that came from generations of experience. Some even created symbolic art, a quiet sign that their minds reached beyond pure survival. Yet beneath this intelligence and strength was something deeply human. They formed groups built on cooperation, care, and shared responsibility. In small communities of fewer than 20 people, every life mattered. But this closeness also carried its own tension. Competition for food, partners, and status could rise quickly, especially in a world where the margin between life and death was razor thin. The same traits that allowed Neanderthals to survive their harsh world also shaped their conflicts and their compassion. To understand their violence, we must first recognize their humanity. Only then can the story of their wounds begin to make sense. When we look across the hundreds of Neanderthal skeletons that have been discovered, one pattern becomes impossible to ignore. Injury was not the exception in their world. It was the rule. Fractured ribs, cracked skulls, broken arms, deep cuts, and healed wounds appear again and again, almost as if every adult carried a history of violence carved into their bones. But why were these injuries so common? Part of the answer lies in the way Neanderthals hunted. They went after enormous animals at close range, using heavy spears that required them to get within striking distance. A single misstep or a panicked animal could send a hunter flying to the ground. In a world filled with giant bison, woolly rhinoceros, and predators lurking in the shadows, danger was always just one mistake away. But not every wound fits the story of a hunt gone wrong. Some fractures appear in places that animals rarely strike. The angles of certain cuts suggest intent, precision, and direction. These are the marks left behind by people, not beasts. To understand this, we can look at modern hunter-gatherers. In many of these groups, most violence comes not from war but from disputes inside the community. Rivalries, jealousy, competition for partners, and arguments over status lead to sudden bursts of conflict. And Neanderthals lived in groups even smaller than these societies, fewer than 20 people sharing a harsh landscape, depending on each other for survival, and living with constant stress. In such tight quarters, emotions could flare quickly. Social scientists call this the paradox of small groups. The closer people are forced together, the more intense their conflicts become. The Neanderthal world was shaped by cooperation, but it was also shaped by the fragile tensions that came with it. Their injuries tell the story of both their strength and their struggles, written in bone for us to read thousands of years later. To see the clearest evidence of violence in the Paleolithic, we return to the dark chamber of Shanidar Cave, where the remains of one particular Neanderthal hold a secret that has puzzled researchers for decades. This individual, known today as Shanidar Three, carries a wound so specific and so deliberate that it changed the way we understand prehistoric conflict. His rib, cleanly pierced by a sharp stone point, shows a cut that could only have come from a finely crafted weapon. But the true mystery lies in the nature of the strike. The angle of the wound comes from slightly above, as if the attacker struck from a higher position. And the depth of the cut matches weapons that were thrown or launched from a distance, not stabbed at close range. Scientists tested this by recreating several kinds of stone spear points used in the region and firing them into animal carcasses. High-energy strikes from close range shattered multiple ribs, but lighter projectiles, thrown with a spear thrower or launched like a dart, produced exactly the kind of clean, single-rib wound found on Shanidar Three. This means the weapon that struck him was likely thrown from several meters away. That is a level of technology and technique not typically associated with Neanderthals, but strongly connected to the arrival of anatomically modern humans in the region. If this wound was caused by a Homo sapien, then Shanidar Three may represent one of the earliest examples of conflict between two human species. But if it came from another Neanderthal, it is still a stunning piece of evidence that long-range weapons were already part of their world. Either way, the message is clear. Violence did not emerge with farming or civilization. It was already here. Yet the story of Shanidar is not only one of conflict. In the same cave, we find the remains of another individual, Shanidar One, whose life reveals a completely different side of the Neanderthal world. His injuries were far more severe and far more personal. A crushing blow damaged his skull and permanently injured his left eye. His ear canals were narrowed by bone growth, leaving him nearly deaf. His right forearm was missing entirely, likely amputated after a traumatic accident or violent injury. His leg and foot bore signs of repeated fractures, healed only through time, rest, and care. In a world as harsh as the Ice Age, a man with these disabilities could not have survived alone. Yet Shanidar One lived for years after his injuries. This means he was fed, protected, and supported by the people around him. Someone gathered food for him. Someone kept him warm. Someone cleaned his wounds. Someone believed his life still mattered, even if he could no longer hunt. This level of care is not an accident. It is evidence of deep social bonds, emotional connection, and a moral code that goes far beyond brute survival. Some researchers believe Shanidar One may have become a storyteller or a keeper of tradition. Someone whose value to the group was not in his strength but in his memory and wisdom. Others suggest he may have been a respected elder whose survival depended on the loyalty of his community. Whatever the truth, his bones remind us that Neanderthals were capable of fierce conflict, but also capable of profound compassion. Their world was not defined by violence alone. It was shaped by the fragile balance between struggle and solidarity, a balance that still defines us today. As we leave Shanidar Cave and travel west across ancient Europe, another shattered skull adds a new piece to this puzzle of prehistoric violence. In the quiet fields of what is now France, at a site called Saint-Césaire, archaeologists uncovered the remains of a Neanderthal whose story is written in a single, devastating blow. The top of his skull carries a long, narrow fracture nearly 6 centimeters wide. It is a clean strike, not the scattered break pattern we expect from falling rocks or accidental injury. The angle and shape of the wound point to a sharp object delivered with force and precision. This was not a slip on the ice. This was an attack. What kind of weapon could leave a scar like that? Wooden clubs hardened by cold conditions can strike with tremendous power, and when shaped to a point they can penetrate bone. Throwing clubs, used for hunting small animals and defense, can land blows strong enough to break a skull. Some may have had stone tips attached, transforming them into deadly composite weapons. All of these possibilities exist within the Neanderthal world. Yet what makes this case even more intriguing is the stone tool culture found alongside the skeleton. These tools belong to the Chattoperonian tradition, a technology that shows hints of transition between Neanderthal methods and those of early Homo sapiens. It raises a quiet but provocative question. Was this Neanderthal wounded by someone inside his own group, or by a member of another human species entering the region? To explore that possibility, we need to understand how Neanderthals compared with the modern humans who eventually replaced them. The differences between the two species go far beyond appearance. Homo sapiens had larger social networks, allowing families to form alliances across distance. These alliances helped reduce conflict by sharing resources, partners, and information. They also had more flexible language, capable of handling negotiation and emotional nuance. In moments of rising tension, words could sometimes replace weapons. Neanderthals, by contrast, lived in much smaller groups where conflict could escalate quickly, simply because there were fewer ways to disengage. There were technological differences as well. Homo sapiens were skilled with long-range weapons, tools that allowed them to strike from a distance and avoid danger. Neanderthals relied more on close-range hunting, a strategy that demanded bravery but increased the risk of injury. If the two groups ever met in tense circumstances, one carried weapons designed to keep opponents far away, while the other depended on strength at close quarters. These differences did not guarantee conflict, but they shaped the outcomes of any encounter. Yet when we look across the fossil record, one truth becomes clear. Neanderthals were not injured more often than early modern humans. Both species lived dangerous lives filled with risk, struggle, and sudden violence. The difference lies in the timing. Neanderthals tended to be injured when they were young, a sign of boldness or competition inside their own groups. Modern humans showed a more even pattern across age. Two species, two strategies, one shared reality. Life in the Ice Age was unforgiving, and every human carried that danger in their bones. When we step back and look at the stories these ancient bones reveal, a clearer picture begins to emerge. Neanderthals were not monsters driven only by rage, nor were they gentle beings untouched by conflict. They were human, shaped by the same forces that still shape us today. They loved, they competed, they protected, they fought, and they cared for one another in ways that echo across 40,000 years of lost time. Their wounds show the reality of danger in their world, but their survival shows the power of community and loyalty that held their small groups together. It is tempting to search for a single explanation for their fate or to frame their story as a clash between species. A dramatic battle that ended with the rise of our own kind. But the truth is quieter and far more complicated. Climate shifted, landscapes changed, populations rose and fell, and in the end, Neanderthals did not disappear entirely. A part of them lives on in many of us today, carried silently in our genes. Their legacy is woven into our bodies, our instincts, and perhaps even our understanding of what it means to be human. So when we ask why they fought, why they cared, and why they survived for so long in a world filled with hardship, we are really asking something deeper. What parts of them still live within us? What strengths, what flaws, and what truths have traveled across the centuries to shape the people we have become? The past is never as distant as it seems. And if we listen closely, the story of these ancient humans becomes a story about ourselves.